The developer of this game has agreed to promote this review. This does not affect my opinion in any way. All opinions contained herein are mine and mine alone. Ever since Settlers of Catan released in 1995, tabletop games have seen something of a renaissance. Even those of us who cannot stand Catan are forced to give the game its due with this fact. Since then, that renaissance has bled over into video games, including faithful digital recreations of tabletop games, tabletop simulator mods, both as official DLC and fan projects, with some board game devs releasing demos or even full free versions of their game on the Steam Workshop to promote their titles, and other times, video games that, while not actually based off of tabletop titles, are still clearly inspired by them. Hello everyone, I'm Adam the Fanatic, also known as Mario Fanatic 15, and today we're going to be looking at a game for the last category, Tales of the Deck by One Bit Factory. Please keep in mind that this is an early access review, and as such, any information contained herein is subject to change. Now, it's no secret at this point that I love tabletop games, but what happens when a video game takes on the card game genre rather than using physical cards? Tales of the Deck is a pixel art card game wherein you'll build a deck, choose a location, and venture out to defeat hordes of monsters. The game includes a short tutorial to get you started, and the basic flow of gameplay is pretty simple. You'll have a hand of 6 cards at the start of each turn, along with 3 heroes that can take 1 action each. Some cards will have a plus icon on them to indicate they give MP when played, whereas others will have an MP cost. Obviously, the higher cost cards tend to be more powerful. If there are no cards a hero can play, or if you simply don't want them to, they also have an innate weapon they can each use. At the end of your turn, you'll have the option to discard any or all of your unused cards, and then you'll draw back up to 6, shuffling and recycling your deck if there aren't enough cards to do so. You may recall last week that I mentioned one of the things I loved about the Star Wars LCG was how much control you have over your hand and deck with the ability to easily get rid of unwanted cards and draw to replace them. And the same applies here as well. When you defeat all enemies, you get to take an item to add to your deck, with later levels giving more powerful items. Then, you attempt to rinse and repeat through a total of 6 increasingly difficult battles. At the onset of the game, you'll have the option of either deck building or using one of 5 pre-made starter decks. Said starter decks feel like training wheels, as though they're more meant to show you the basic concept of the game rather than something you're actually intended to win with. And they serve this point and purpose well enough, giving you a basic feel for the game and how cards and characters interact with one another. But soon you're likely to want to build something of your own and try and win with that instead. As of the time of writing this review, there are 4 characters: the Cleric, the Knight, the Thief, and the Wizard. Wait a minute, wrong review. The game's Steam page also mentions there is a 5th character, the Ranger, currently in the works. You'll choose 3 characters to bring with you on your adventures, each of which must bring exactly 6 cards to the deck. You'll have to balance MP plus cards to build up your power, and more powerful cards to use once you've readied said power. Each character has their own strengths, weaknesses, and unique playstyle, though there is some degree of overlap. For example, the Cleric is by far the best at healing the group, but the Knight and Wizard both have some healing cards too. In addition to healing, the Cleric also has several ways to give his allies extra MP or actions. They're also capable of confusing monsters, causing them to randomly hurt themselves or other enemies. Whereas the Cleric focuses on healing, the Knight can prevent damage in the first place. The Knight has many cards which apply Protect to either himself or an ally, reducing any damage they would otherwise take. The Knight also has lots of high damage, single target attacks. But being the honorable duelist he is, he often holds back against weaker foes, with some of his cards only being able to target monsters with lots of HP, or being more effective against bosses. The Thief, however, has no such honor. Quite the contrary, several of their attacks will specifically target the weakest enemy, or simply will not work against bosses. They also have a number of cards which grant heroes extra actions, and can poison foes to slowly damage them over time. Their other defining feature is that they have a lot of weak, multi-hit attacks. Finally, you have the Wizard. They're the best at simply dealing raw damage, be it a single powerful hit to one target, or striking multiple enemies for more spread out damage. Additionally, they have access to the Slow status ailment, which reduces the amount of damage a single enemy deals. Though in my opinion, the most notable thing about the Wizard is their Armageddon card. Whereas other cards cap their cost at 5 MP, Armageddon costs a whopping 9, but instantly destroys all enemies if you manage to play it, outright winning the vast majority of levels. There's also a number of concepts that aren't really limited to any one character. For example, every character has a number of Swift cards that give them an extra action immediately after playing said cards. There's also cards for each character that have an added bonus when played on an enemy that's currently under their status effect, or on an ally in case the Knights protect. If you want to share your deck, or try someone else's, there's an option to copy or paste a deck code into the game. Want to nuke everything with that Armageddon card? I'll post the deck code for my Turtles Apocalypse deck in the description. If you've made any fun decks yourself, be sure to share them with a comment. There's currently 2 locations which you can adventure in, each with its own set of enemies to overcome: the forest and the graveyard. In the forest, you'll fight things like wolves, giant spiders, and nature spirits. In the graveyard, you'll face enemies like ghosts, skeletons, zombies, and vampires. I wouldn't say the graveyard is harder than the forest, but it is a little more complicated. You have more enemies with on-death and on-hit actions, requiring you to pay a bit more attention to them. In addition to each having their own challenges, each location does have a degree of randomization in the enemies you'll face. For example, when you reach the final stage of the forest, you'll face either a dire spider or Gaia. Meanwhile, in the graveyard, you'll sometimes see the Undertaker, an Abomination, or a Bone Golem as a mid-game boss. Added with the randomized rewards you get for completing each level, no 2 runs will be exactly the same, and this gives the game a slight roguelike nature. And as with a roguelike, you're liable to die a lot before you start to work out things and find the strategy that suits you. But if you play around enough, you'll eventually find a playstyle that fits your niche and allows you to push through to the end. Presentation-wise, the game is rather lacking. I do like the sprite work on the heroes and monsters alike, however they're all static with no animations. On the other hand, attacks each have unique animations, and they're passable but a little uninteresting. Even higher cost cards just aren't that impressive to watch. The music is fine and sets the mood well enough, though there doesn't seem to be any sound effects in the game as of yet. I'm assuming those will be patched in later as development on the game continues. There's no story to speak of, not even a short little blurb to introduce the game and its world. At its core, Tales of the Deck feels almost more like a tabletop game than a video game, for both good and ill. With just a few small tweaks, it could actually be a card game. If you're looking for a large, continuous adventure, this isn't the game for you. I'd liken it very much to Sentinels of the Multiverse. If you're just seeking to defeat each boss once and then plan to be done with the game, you'll find it incredibly short. Likewise, if you approach Tales of the Deck, beat the forest, beat the graveyard, and then hang up your hat, you'll be finished in short order. If, however, you're the sort that enjoys trying new strategies and figuring out different ways to approach the same problem, you'll find there's quite a bit of fun to be had here. As this is an early access title, I will not be giving Tales of the Deck a formal review score at this time. As always, any buyer should remain aware of the risk of purchasing a title that is still in development. What is here already is quite fun. The characters have a lot of variety, and there's a multitude of different ways to approach any given situation. Since you build most of your deck beforehand, you have a lot more strategy than games like Slay the Spire, where so much of the game is up to the whims of what the RNG decides to throw at you. On the downside, the game is lacking the presentation department, with still characters and lackluster attack animations. But if you can overlook that, and enjoy tabletop-style video games, the gameplay is quite solid and definitely worth checking out. Thank you for watching. You can find links to purchase the game on Steam or visit the official website down below. So what about you, though? Are there any particular tabletop-inspired video games that you enjoy? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. At least you never have to worry about splitting the party here. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.